Welcome to the Achieve It podcast, hosted by marketing coach, journalist, technologist, and Speaker Hall of Fame member Terry Brock. Get ready to discover new and interesting ways to reach and connect with customers as Terry and his guests dive into the world of technology, marketing, relationship building, productivity, and other ideas that will help you achieve your entrepreneurial dreams. And now, here's your host, a fun and smart guy with a really good haircut, Terry Brock.
In today's world, we hear a lot about people saying, it's not human enough anymore on this digital media. We're seeing Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn. There's a lot of good in there, I think, but there's also the error of people trying to do too much electronically. I think it's wonderful that we can have a way to reach out to people as human beings. And this relates not only on one-on-one as a person, but also for businesses. And I have found something that I wanted to share with you. You know, I talk about relationship marketing and the importance of connecting with people as human beings, and share something that I've discovered recently that I know you're going to like. As a matter of fact, share my screen here with you, show you my little keynote slides. I got a book that you are going to want to look into. It's called Fanocracy, Turning Fans into Customers and Customers into Fans. Very nice. They've got a website, fanocracy.com. Make sure you take a look at that. The two people that wrote it, David Meerman Scott and his daughter, Reiko Scott, who is currently in medical school. And the two of them collaborating together, put together this wonderful book. And matter of fact, I've got a treat for you today, because today what we're going to do is get a chance to find out about that book directly from David Meerman Scott. And David's joining us now on screen here with Zoom. David, it is so good to have you with us today, sir.
Thank you, Terry. What a fantastic introduction. Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it. It's great to be here.
Well, you bet. I really appreciate it. I've read your book twice.
Wow.
And going through it, highlighting and looking at it, reading it on my Note 10 Plus. I really like it because what you're talking about is really needed today. We do have a serious issue with social media. It starts as good. I particularly like the idea that I can connect with people I know around the world, but it also can be abused. Now, you come along with the book Fanocracy saying, hey, the way to overcome all that is something that's unique. Would you do us a favor and tell us what you mean by Fanocracy, and tell us a little bit about the philosophy and ideas behind that?
Yeah, right. So you're absolutely right. What I recognized starting about 5 years ago is that so many people were abusing the online channel. You know, you get on their email list and they'll send you 3 or 4 emails a day, or they'll connect with you on LinkedIn and immediately try to sell you something. And also the polarization, you know, the political world is polarized online, and so on. So my daughter and I were looking for what it means to be a fan of something, what it means to be a genuine fan of something. And we've been exploring that idea now for 5 years in the researching and then the writing, and now talking with people like you about this idea of fanocracy. And we chose the word fanocracy to imply that this is when fans are in charge. It's when fans rule. So a democracy ruled by the people, a meritocracy ruled by those with the best ability. A fanocracy is an environment that's ruled by the fans. And the real idea, if I can boil it down into one sentence, 5 years of research, a year of writing, if I can boil it down into one sentence, it's fanocracy is really about a true, genuine human connection. And that's something you've been talking about for a long time, Terry.
Yeah, it's very important. And I think that we can use that in business. And it really, from a bottom line business point of view, it gives you an advantage when you're kind to people. You listen to them. And you give a lot of examples about that in the book. Matter of fact, I want to go back to the book here, sharing my screen again here as we click on this and take a look at what you've put together. The stories that you tell in the book, I think, are fascinating. You talk about a bookstore and fanocracy, a bookstore. And from the book, you talked about a man named Wynn here from this paragraph down here is a hands-on owner at Brookline Booksmith. He wants people to interact with him and tap his knowledge, which would be obvious to you if you spent 2 minutes with him. Books are Wynn's passion. He even publishes his email address on the store's website. And I like this quote that you put there of him. I'm the owner, but I'm in the store myself. I'm selling books and I work at the cash register. He says, I'm available to anyone in the store at any time. It's important that people know I'm here. We're always trying to make sure that people who enjoy books have a good experience so they continue to be fans of books and this store. And they know they can come here any day to find a book, get a great recommendation to find things that they don't know that they wanted to be successful these days. And this is really key. You have to be ready to put in the effort into building relationships with customers. I love what he says about that. And I'd like to turn it over to you to expand on that and tell us a little bit about that, particularly in the environment he's in bookstores versus the Amazon, Barnes and Noble, et cetera.
Yeah, and that's really why we found this particular example so compelling, is because he doesn't sell books cheaper. You can get it cheaper on Amazon. It's more convenient to go to Amazon and the online booksellers because you click a button and it arrives sometimes even the same day. You don't even have to leave your house.
Yes.
But what he's doing is he's creating a community. He's creating a fabulous group of people, a tribe, if you will, of people who are fans of the Brookline Booksmith. They have over 100 events every year. And in fact, in middle of January, Reiko and I are doing our book launch event at Brookline Booksmith because it's pretty near to where we live. They also, I find this really interesting, they have a book club that they host that has absolutely nothing to do with Brookline Booksmith. They just said, hey, if you want space for your book club, come here. So what's happening on so many levels at Brookline Booksmith is that they're developing a true connection between people who love books and sell books and people who love books and who are buyers of books. And they're making that connection in a true community fashion.
Great concept.
Which is, really difficult, if not impossible, to do in an online world. Yes, you can still have online communities, but the community that they've built at Brookline Booksmith is incredibly powerful.
Yeah, I like that. And that gives them a real advantage that, say, Amazon, which is a wonderful place. I buy a lot of books from Amazon.
So do I.
Amazon can't match because they don't have the community, that tribe that you talk about. And really, that's what the fanocracy is all about. And I like in the book, you give several examples of that. And as I share the screen here again, take a look at some of these that you've talked about. I think they're particularly nice, where we see the examples of on-stage and fanocracy there and what's happening with it, because this is something that we can relate to. Myself as a professional speaker, many professional speakers and communicators are going to be watching this. You talk about this in your book there on your resource section. By the way, those of you watching this, be sure to go to fanocracy.com/resources and get this about intimate space. And I found this fascinating, where less than 1.5 feet is intimate. Personal space, 1.5 to 4, et cetera, kind of grows. And this is important because you talked about some things here. There's no way possible I can reach each person on the stage to have him or her be within my personal space the way Steve Cohen does. He does a lot of presentations. And yet, it turns out we humans respond to seeing somebody else having an experience as if it were us. I love that. And you say, I'm purposefully getting into the personal space of just a few members of the audience, but because of their brains' mirror neurons, others in the audience can feel my presence. This is something that is really important that we see for those of us that do a lot of presentations. And for professional speakers that are watching this, I'm talking to you. Listen to what David has to say about that. David, could you expand on that for the professional speakers watching
Sure.
as well as others?
Well, actually, it has applicability for all businesses. So yeah, so let me expand a little bit on that that graphic you shared, and then this concept of mirror neurons.
Please.
My daughter Reiko, my co-author on this book, has been a fabulous co-author because she is a neuroscientist. Not only is she a millennial woman, so a different generation, different gender, but she's also a neuroscientist. She did a neuroscience degree at Columbia University, and as you said, Terry, now is in her final year of medical school. So we wanted to interview some neuroscientists to understand what's going on in the brain when we become a fan of something. And it turns out that in our brain, when we're close to other human beings, it's a survival technique for us to know very clearly in our mind, is this person who's near me part of my tribe? and therefore somebody I should trust. And that's a very positive human connection. Or is that person who's nearby me a potential threat, and I need to kick in my flight or fight mode? That's hardwired in our brains. We can't help it. And it's fascinating to understand that, because it means a lot of interesting things. So those different levels of proximity, further than 20 feet, called public space, that's where most speakers are for the audience. The audience is sitting in their chairs, you're on a stage, you're 20 feet or further away. When people are 20 feet or further away, we know they're there, but our brains don't track those people. We don't kick into our DNA and begin to track those people. Inside of 20 feet, approximately between 12 and 20 feet, we do. That's called social space. And within social space, our brains begin to track people. You can walk into a crowded room, your brain can't help but track those people. You need to know, are they part of my tribe or are they potential enemy? And then within even closer, within 4 feet, is called personal space. Intimate space really only used for close family members or very close friends. But personal space inside of 4 feet. And the idea of inside of 4 feet becomes really interesting, because it's cocktail party distance. If you're at a cocktail party, you're sharing something with somebody, it's a very, very strong, positive human connection. If you get into a crowded elevator and you're with people you don't know, that for all of us, we get a little nervous. You can't help it, because your brain is firing and saying, oh my gosh, are there enemies here? I don't know these people. Now the mirror neuron, and so what does this mean for public speaking? What it means is, can you get closer to your customers than just being in public space, just being on stage? Can you walk down from the stage and be close to people? Hand them a handheld microphone and ask them a question. Put your hand on their shoulder. As long as it's comfortable, don't do anything that for anyone feels, you don't want to violate somebody's personal space. But if you can do it in a way that's comfortable, that can be really great. And so this can also be used for any business. Can you host a conference? Can you take a client out to lunch? Can you go on a tour of your customers' businesses and meet with them in person? And then the concept of mirror neurons that you pointed out in that passage is really interesting, because these are the parts of our brains that fire when we see somebody doing something as if we're doing it ourselves. Let me demonstrate, Terry.
Please.
I'm holding a lemon in one hand and a slice of lemon in the other hand.
Okay.
So if I take a bite of this slice of lemon, wow, it's really powerful. My eyes scrunch up, my mouth immediately sort of puckers, and I'm feeling really strongly the sensation of that tart lemon on my tongue. My saliva is doing its thing. I mean, lemons are powerful.
Yeah.
My brain is firing. But through the power of mirror neurons, Terry, your brain is probably firing too. And I would suggest that you might have tasted a little bit of lemon on your tongue.
I certainly did. Yeah, I could taste that.
Isn't that interesting? And even if you're listening to this as a podcast without the video component, you're probably also tasting a bit of lemon. That's through the concept of mirror neurons. So here's what this means for everybody. Everyone watching or listening into this. If you use video like Terry is so effectively using video right now, you're actually, through mirror neurons, telling the people who are watching this in their brain that you're actually in the same room as them in their personal space within 4 feet, even though you're not, even though you could be thousands and thousands of miles away. This is exactly why we feel we know movie stars. We feel we know movie stars because our mirror neurons fire and says we've been in the personal space of these people. We trust them. They're part of our tribe. And so as business people, all of us can use this. We can use video on our websites. We can use photographs even work. Doesn't even have to be video. Photos on our website. We can do what Terry's doing now, create a video series where you interview people, or a series where you talk directly to the camera. All of these are really powerful ways that you can be in close physical proximity in a virtual way with somebody and get their mirror neurons fired. Now, what it means for public speakers is if you're on the camera, on the screen, and you get into the close physical proximity of a couple of people, maybe by handing them a handheld microphone, even somebody 100 rows back, if it's a 2,000 person venue, those people will still feel as though you are near them through the magic of mirror neurons because they're seeing it on the screen. I think that this is one of the most powerful things that's so easy to learn and so easy to implement that we found out around this concept of developing fans, is how easy it is to make a couple of changes on your website or a couple of changes in how you do your speeches and use this power of proximity.
Yeah, I think that's real powerful. I really appreciate you using this with video, because that was a question I wanted to ask you.
Yeah.
Just how we do that. And I like the way you did it. Those of you watching this, think about this. He held up the lemon, put the lemon there, a real lemon. That was a real lemon that you had, and you actually tasted and felt that pungent feel and sensation of it.
Yeah, absolutely right. And what you're doing right now by doing this on video, Terry, we're cropped on this camera right now, both of us, as if we're approximately 4 feet from the camera, which is exactly personal space, cocktail party distance. So you're doing exactly the right thing with this video. Now I'm going to back up a little bit here. If I'm this far back, video, it's nowhere near as powerful.
That's exactly right. And also the voice. So because you're using the microphone there, that's right near that, if back there, we feel, we can hear you okay, but there's something psychologically that happens when we don't hear you as well.
Right. So getting close to the camera like we are now, good quality audio. The reason this is so powerful is because our brains are telling, even though intellectually I know you're on a screen, Terry, my brain tells me we're 4 feet apart.
Yeah, I think that's important in my own experience. I found before I do a program like you, I go out and speak around the world. I've been doing it about 36 years now, so I figure I'm off to a good start.
Wow, yeah. You're a practicing speaker. You're always practicing. Right?
Always
practicing. Never quite get there.
Always want to get better. That's right. One of the things I like to do is, let's suppose I'm doing a program. I've done this many times. That they're holding the meeting in May the 3rd. It's going to be in Vegas. What I will do often is before that, say sometime in April or maybe March, I'll hold a conference on video with an association, and I'll ask the meeting planner for a couple of their people that are well-known, well-liked within the organization that could give some ideas. And so we host a session on, here's what's happening in the widget industry with Mary and with Jane, and Mary's in New York, Jane's in Los Angeles or whatever. And we talk to them and we get real nitty gritty with industry terms, industry of what's going on, how they're doing it, and say, and by the way, if you want to know more, Mary and Jane are both going to be speaking at the conference May 3rd in Vegas.
Oh, nice.
And you can register now. So we're giving real value. It's not just a sales pitch. It's real value. And what happens, meeting planners tell me that when we do that, we usually say, and by the way, there's going to be a price increase for attending at the conference right afterwards, tomorrow. So register now. People see it. They know Mary and Jane now even more. And they go, oh, that was really relevant. And then guess what happens to registration? We see a spike in those.
That's so interesting. Oh, wow. Cool.
So what you're talking about there is good.
Very, very important stuff. And like I said, we're talking about it a little bit in the context of speaking, but it can be useful for anybody in any business.
Absolutely. It would seem like, for instance, you've got widgets. Well, let's go back to the bookstore as an example. They could have video here where they go, a new book just came out and here it is, and talk about it, interviewing the author, et cetera. And that author is going to be right here in Brookline Bookstore next Wednesday, something like that.
Yeah, that's right.
And I think there's some real possibilities on that. Well, let me go back here to my slides that I've got and take a look at some of these and some other areas I want to cover, because I really love what you have done here. I like this quote here. A genuine interest in your customer leads from transaction to fanocracy. Instead of just that one time, you're there with the person on a regular basis. And you, David, are a big fan, I know now from the book and from other books you have, The Grateful Dead, my favorite band, that's you speaking here. And a big part of the reason is how it treats fans. The Grateful Dead was the first band that realized it was selling music. And one of the best ways to sell music was to get as many people exposed to that music as possible. And I think that leads to a concept you talk about, really
Yeah,
important for those of us that are in communication, using communication. What is free and what should be paid? And you
right.
talk about something that I just loved what you said here. There's a hybrid offer. Where
Yeah,
you have a hybrid offer is a lead generation method that takes both religious views into account. Within the initial free content that you give people, you include a secondary offer that requires registration that you can use to capture leads. And an added benefit of that is the approach is the difference in leads. A gated content approach simply generates email addresses from people who want your initial content offer. The hybrid approach, on the other hand, generates email addresses from people who have already consumed your initial free content and now want more information about your company and your products and your services and are eager to learn more. In other words, they're fans and fanocracy.
right.
Most leading scoring systems, the hybrid model leads to be hotter than the white paper leads. And I think that is nothing short of brilliant what you've done there. Tell us a little
Yeah.
bit more about that, because I know it's something people are sensitive about. What should be
No, it's
free?
very
What should be
sensitive.
paid? How do we know which is which?
Yeah. Well, I look at it, first of all, as you rightly said, coming at it from the Grateful Dead. And Terry, you've got my Grateful Dead Wall of Fame right here.
Oh yeah, there it is. Very
Yeah,
good.
yeah,
I like
yeah,
it.
I mean, I'm a big fan. I've seen 75 Grateful Dead concerts. And so the Grateful Dead did something remarkable to get me and people like me into the fold as fans. What they did was they were among the only bands in history that ever said, you can record our concerts. You can even bring professional level recording gear in. And we'll get, it's huge. I mean, like literally big, fat recording devices. And they gave people a power strip they could plug into. And they gave them a seat right behind the mixing board where the sound quality was the best. And the Grateful, every other band on the ticket, it said no recording devices. And if you walked into the venue with a recording device, they'd kick you out. The Grateful Dead said, sure, why not? Come on in. And what happened in the early days, it was cassette tapes, but later on MP3 files that were shared, one fan to another fan to another fan. And when the Grateful Dead has now been around for 54 years.
Wow.
So in the early days, this was a social network before Mark Zuckerberg was even born, of people who traded these tapes. They only had one rule. You can't sell the tapes, but as long as you trade them or give them away, we're totally cool with it. So I fast forwarded to present day, and the idea, and by the way, the Grateful Dead became the most popular touring band in history in the last years of Jerry Garcia in the late 1990s. And there's still people like me who go to the concerts. Now John Mayer is playing the Jerry Garcia role. I went 6 times this year to Grateful Dead concerts.
Wow. Good for you.
So fast forward to now, a lot of companies, especially in the B2B world, but all kinds of companies, provide content on their websites with a gate on it. So typically that means a white paper where you have to fill out a form to be able to get the white paper. And I believe that that is not the best way to generate fans, because you're not giving that white paper for free. You're demanding somebody's contact information before you give them the white paper. That sets up an adversarial relationship before you've even met somebody. However, if you make it completely and totally free, you're giving a gift without any expectation of anything in return, just like the Grateful Dead did. And that is way more likely to generate fans. And as you mentioned, this hybrid approach that I wrote about in Fanocracy is make the initial white paper or other piece of content on the web utterly free, just like the Grateful Dead did, completely free, no registration. Yes, please download our white paper, no barriers at all. Then inside of that white paper, or whatever it is you're offering for free, you have an offer that people do have to register for. That's the hybrid approach. So the white paper is completely free. It has tremendous value. And inside of that is a link to subscribe to the email newsletter, or a link to subscribe to the webinar, or some other form of an offer. And this does two things. Number one, it builds fans because the initial content is free. And number two, it also potentially generates sales leads.
Yes, indeed. I like that. It's the human approach, the kind way of doing it. But also,
Yeah.
by the way, and I think back to business school, they told us that making money was a good thing. And we find, yes, it is. And you actually make more that way. So
Right.
that is brilliant. And it's one of those things we want to watch over and over. I'm glad we're getting this on video here. Well, going back to the slides we've got here, I've got a few more that I want to go through and really tap into what you're talking about
Sure.
here.
Of course,
I like
let's
what
do
you
it.
talk about here. You say this is what fandoms do. They bring us closer to the place where we can share our joy with others. They are a way to communicate who we are. More than that, here's the key. They make us happy. And with that happiness, we find the energy to do extraordinary work. It seems like we become more fulfilled as people when we have been able to give to others and we've been able to help them in a powerful way, in a real way. And you're showing many examples of that in the book. Tell us a little bit more about some of your favorite examples from the book or from those that might not be in the book, where people are using fanocracy to be able to not only help their bottom line, but they're also happier that way.
So my favorite example, just because it's so surprising, is an example from the early part of the book, and it's Hagerty Insurance.
Yes.
And what's
Those
so interesting about this is that everybody on the planet hates auto insurance. You hate to buy it because you don't want to spend money on it. It's not fun to spend money on auto insurance. And number two, it's even worse if you have to use the product because it meant that you crashed your car. What a terrible product. So I was speaking to McKeel Hagerty. He's the CEO of Hagerty Insurance. And you're right, Terry, it's classic car auto insurance. And he said, David, everyone hates my business. It sucks. I had to figure out a new way to market because I can't do what everyone else does. I can't just market by being the cheapest. I can't market by spending the most money on advertising, using geckos or lizards or something. I've got to do something different. So what McKeel Hagerty decided to do was focus on fans. So they go to over 100 classic car events in North America a year, where they're meeting people who are fans of classic cars.
Nice.
So these people are already fans of classic cars, and Hagerty is there on site. They have a booth. They provide educational seminars. They provide valuation reports. How much is my classic car worth? They're providing all kinds of valuable information. They have a YouTube channel that has about 1 million subscribers, which is incredible for an auto insurance company with 1 million subscribers on YouTube. 650,000 members of the Hagerty Drivers Club. Wow. They have a bi-monthly print magazine. And I'm a fan of Hagerty because I have a 1973 Land Rover that's been insured by Hagerty since 2005. Big fan. And I'm happy when I get my bill for my auto insurance from Hagerty. I'm happy to pay that bill. And so what they've done is they've tapped an existing fandom, people who are already fans of classic cars. What we found is so interesting is the idea that passion is infectious. When people have passion, that passion rubs off. And those of us who are fans of something, like I have a 1973 Land Rover, I'm a fan of a classic Land Rover. I'm a fan of the Grateful Dead. My daughter's a massive fan of Harry Potter. When you're a fan of something, you're naturally a passionate person. And so the passion you have for something in your private life actually manifests itself in you doing a better job at work, because that passion is infectious. Because people love doing business with other people who have passion. And so just one real simple thing that comes out of this that I love is when you're meeting somebody for the first time, especially in a business setting, most people are like, what do you do? Mm-hmm. I just love to turn that around and say, what do you do on the weekend? Mm-hmm. Or what are you passionate about? Or if you had a day off and that automatically came to you, you didn't even think about it, all of a sudden you had a day off, what would you want to do? And that gives you a new way to connect with someone around passion. And so we just had such a great time with this book, learning from, we spoke with thousands of people about what they're a fan of, and then figured out how organizations can use this idea of fandom to grow their business. And we learned that a work-life balance is BS, Terry.
Mm-hmm.
It's really about how do you make work and life part of the same thing?
Yes.
How do you bring your passions into it? Those are the people who are successful.
Yeah, I agree. I have often people say, well, are you working or are you playing? I go, yes and yes.
Yeah,
You know, because
absolutely.
it's both. I think you got to have that work that you really enjoy. What was it Confucius that said, if you work at what you love, you'll never work a day in your life.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think
right.
that's really what you're epitomizing in this book. And so it's real good. Now, those of you that are watching this, yes, you want to look into this. And matter of fact, I'm going to share the screen again here. It's kind of a geeky thing to do. I like that, being the geek
It's
that
good.
I am.
All good and geeky.
Something that you'll want to make a point of is bounce over to fanocracy.com. Here it is. This is the slide I've got. And they've got a lot of resources there for you. And matter of fact, hang on a second. What I'm going to do is just bounce over here and we're going to tap into these resources. There I am live on here. There's a great little video that draws out my handwriting that. And there's some really nice information here that you can get for free, and you don't have to put in your name or that, but really good material. I particularly liked some of these notes that were here and some of the ideas from what they're using at HubSpot, where you have been involved a lot. And of course, I really, really liked the quote you have here from my pal and my buddy, Sally Hogshead, fellow member of Speaker Hall of Fame, who lives just down the road from us.
Oh, really? Cool.
And I think what she said was very good. I might want to get your comments on this. The world is not changed by people who sort of care, or companies who sort of care. The world is changed by those who passionately and relentlessly care, because your customers will too, and your brand becomes impossible to resist. Fanocracy shows how to change customers into fans so your brand can change the world. Thank you, Sally, for doing that. And David, I'm going to give you the floor for any closing remarks and how people can get in touch with you and any further remarks you have about Fanocracy.
So I think Sally's nailed it. And that's the whole idea of how when you have that passion just comes through and people naturally are gravitated to you. And so I think this concept is valuable for anybody, the idea of understanding how Fanocracy works, because not only can you use it in business, but you can also use it to have a more passionate life. And isn't that what we're all really about, is having a passionate life?
Yep.
So Terry, I really appreciate you having me on. As you mentioned, fanocracy.com. We've got all the resources that Terry just shared. On social networks, I am DM Scott, DMSCOTT. And I am the only David Meerman Scott on the planet. So if you Google David Meerman Scott, you will get me and only me. And that's exactly why I've been using my middle name professionally for about 20 years.
Exactly. And please spell that middle name. We can see it on the screen here, but for those that are listening on audio, please spell that more.
David, Meerman Scott.
Very good. And Reiko, your daughter, the co-author on that, be sure and tell her we said hello and thank her from all of us for what she has done on this.
Thanks very much for having me on, Terry. It's great fun.
David, great being with you. I really appreciate you. I've read some of your books before and really love them. On this one, you outdid yourself. They were really high before, and now they're even higher.
Well, I give Reiko a ton of credit, because as you will have known from the chapters we wrote separately.
Yep.
An interesting story there is originally we wrote it together as one voice. And then it wasn't working. We couldn't figure out why, and we realized that it was tamping down our individual styles. So we went to each of us writing chapters. But anyway, as you will have noticed, she's a way better writer than me. So she's the one who pulled up the quality of my book from where it was to where it is now.
Yeah, I particularly like what she was talking about. Is she's a medical student now, about to graduate very soon, and she talked about treating people as people the way they want, not just with numbers and physicians saying, well, we kept them alive. Well, there's more to being alive than just being alive.
Yeah,
and I love the way she said that in the book.
It's really interesting. She looks at a patient based on their story, not just their symptoms.
Yeah. And you see these stories that are there, those of you watching this, these stories will ring true to you. You'll feel it. You'll know that this is the kind of wave to approach it. It works well. You don't have to be pushy. Matter of fact, you shouldn't be from a business point of view. You want to follow that. David Meerman Scott, thank you so much for joining us, for writing the book and being with us today.
Thanks, Terry.